Hey guys, JK Wargames. So today we're going to do a review of Field Commander Napoleon by DVG Games. So have to say a massive thanks to Sarah and Dan for sending this to the channel for review. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay guys, so Field Commander Napoleon, let's have a look what you get inside the box. So first of all, you get your rule book, which is full colour and is really well laid out. As usual with DVG Games, all their rule books are full colour and explain everything and give loads of examples. So I found this very easy to follow. Goes through everything you need to know. So that is your rule book. Then you get your Napoleon campaign sheet, so you can just make notes of the campaign you're on and campaign notes. So that's useful to have. Then we get tons, and I mean tons of tokens. So you can see here they're all dated differently. So these are 1809. Then we get tokens here. We got 1815, etc. So you've probably got about, well, how many have we got here? Let's have a count. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, about 13 sheets of tokens. So if we take a look at some of the tokens up close, these are the French ones. So you can see these French tokens, they're fantastic. And what you get on the tokens is a combat value. So normally the unit will have to roll this number or less to inflict a hit. And this is an activation number, the top number. So if you needed to roll to activate the group, you'd have to roll a 5 or less. So also, we get our game boards. Now, there are a ton of these game boards. So as you can see, the one laid out in front of me, absolutely fantastic artwork. And what you get on here is everything's laid out on the board. So you can see if I'm playing the 1805 campaign, it tells me how many supply points I get, which we're going to later. It tells me what forces to take. It tells me where the enemies are placed and if there's any late arrivals. And then it tells me where to place Napoleon and also what objectives we have for the campaign. So then we have a different map for different years. So you can see 1812 there. And then you get your turn track goes along here. So that's the boards. I won't go through every single one, but there you go. 1796, which is the first campaign, and then there's actually about 4 more boards. So you get a lot of content there. So also you get your battle board. So let's have a look at that. Okay, so this is the battle board. And what you get here is French reserve, French approach, French front, and then you get enemy front, enemy approach, enemy reserve. And this is where you set up the forces when they come to battle. And on the side here, we have battle orders. So in most battles, you assign battle orders. But if you don't assign any, the rest of the units use these standard ones on the sides, but we'll go into how this all works in a bit. You also get the help sheet. So before you start a battle, you have to roll for fog of war, and then you follow down the list. It tells you how many battle turns you get and any special things that might happen. And then it gives you a battle turn sequence, how many battle plans for each side, and it tells you line formation and a column formation. So if we go back to the main board now, like this, I'll explain how the game works. So in Field Commander Napoleon, you are Napoleon and you're commanding your forces, the French forces, and you're trying to take cities as objectives and win. So in this 1805 campaign, you can see these tokens here are the objectives. So what we do is, according to the instructions on the board, we lay the objectives down in the cities that we're told to. And then what you'll find is you go through a sequence of play. So once you've set up, it tells you France, you advance the turn counter. So if we were at the start of this campaign, we'd advance the turn counter, and then we get to move forces. So when a force moves, it can move 1. It can't move any more. So let's say we were in here, so we haven't got an objective, but we're allowed to move 1. We then move adjacent to it into this city, and we capture that objective. So basically, in 1805, we're trying to capture 5 objectives before we get to the end of the campaign. So what happens is, if we have enemies in, let's just say we got these guys in here. How the game, the turn works. So we advance the turn counter, we do our moves with our French forces, we then resolve any battles. So if this French force happened to move into here, the minute you move into an area with an enemy, there will be a battle. But what you need to do is, before you go to the battle board, you need to work out if you have routed the enemy, destroyed them. So you work out your combat values. So you add all these combat values together, and then you times it by 3. And if we had more than times 3 of the enemy, we would destroy them. If the enemy had more than times 3 than us, they would destroy us. So if that is not the case, which usually it isn't, you would then take these forces and put them onto the battle board. And then you go through the sequence of playing the battle, which we'll have a look at in a sec. But once battles are resolved, you then get a force march phase. So after any battles, your forces can then move again, so they can move into another area. Then you would resolve any more battles, and then you move on to the French resupply. So up here, France resupply, it says you gain 4 supply points plus 5 more supply points if you hold 5 cities. Well, we don't at the moment. But supply points are really useful because you can use supply points to buy more forces. You can use supply points to buy more battle plans. So it's very useful to have as many supply points as you can. And obviously the enemy have their own supply points. So once you've done that, that's the end of your turn. It then moves into the enemy turn. And the enemy turn is slightly different. So the enemy roll a dice and consult this chart on the board. This is going to tell you what actions the enemy take. But at the very top, it says roll for groups of 4 forces in the same area. So if we have this group here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we had another 4, but we had these all grouped together, we separate them into groups of 4, and then we roll for each group. So we'd roll a dice for this group here. We've rolled a 3. Now a 3, it says enemy held objective. So we would move towards the closest enemy held objective. So let's say these guys are back in here. They hold this objective. This group, the enemy force, move into there. You would then roll for this group. They've rolled a 7. So a 6 to 8 is a French held objective. So they move towards the nearest French held objective, which again would be here. But let's just say they were from French in here that were holding it, and these guys went here. They would move into there. Then after you've rolled for all enemy groups, you then resolve battles. So you take this group and resolve the battle. You take this group and resolve the battle. Afterwards, you're then going to do enemy resupply. And again, up in this box up here, this is the same on every board, roll for each enemy held city. So if this group had destroyed the French and they hold this city, we'd roll for them. We rolled a 2, it says we gain 1 garrison. So you would take a garrison from off board, and place it in the city. You can also gain 2 supply points, you gain 1 reinforcement, or you gain 1 fortification. And then once the enemy have resolved their turn, it's then back to your turn. So again, you're going to advance the turn counter. You're then going to move your forces. And the aim of the game is to capture all objectives. But sometimes each campaign will have different instructions. For this 1805, we need to capture all 5. Now, the brilliant thing about this is that there's a lot of decision making to do, which I think is a really neat thing, because you're trying to push big forces into enemies to destroy them, but then you need enough forces to be able to capture all the objectives. So you're going to have to split your forces up wisely and try and push up as much as you can. So there really is some great decision making to be done. So what we're going to do, we're going to look at a battle and how that plays out. Okay, so before a battle begins, we have to roll on the fog of war. So we roll a dice, we've rolled a 2. Now over on the fog of war, you can see on a 2, it says that we gain 2 supply points and the battle will have 3 turns. So we add 2 to our 2 we have already, so we now have 4 supply points. Now, what's neat about this is that if the enemy have 4 to 6 supply points, you can take away 2 of their supply points to get a +2 on your roll. So we could take 2 of the enemy supply points and +2 on our dice roll, which would give us 4. And then it says pay 2 supply points to add any one French recruit to one French occupied area. Now, the higher the dice roll, the worse it is, the better it is for the enemy. And then also, if a 7+ supply points, you can get a +4 on your die roll if you use 4 of the enemy's supply points. But we're not going to do that. We've rolled a 2, we've gained 2 supply points. So once we have done this, we then again check if the enemy or our French forces have more than 3 times than the enemy, but we know we haven't, so that's fine. What we do then is determine battle plan quantities. Now on the campaign map, it tells me that the enemy have 4 battle plans. So you take the token, they have 4. Now, if we don't have Napoleon in our force, we only get 1 battle plan. If we have Napoleon, we get the amount stated on him, so we get 4 battle plans as well. But for this example, we're just going to say that we've got 1. Then what's going to happen is I'm going to pay 2 supply points to add another battle plan. So we take away the 2 supply points we earn, and we can put that up to 2 battle plans. Now we could pay 5 supply points if we had it and get 2 more battle plans, but we're not going to. So once we've done that, we can buy additional, we've done that. We then select insight counters. Now I'm not going to go into that because I don't want to confuse people. So basically we place our French forces and then we place our enemy forces. So if we come back to the battle board, you can see that you can deploy 4 forces in the French approach, and the French reserve you can have up to 6, or you can have as many as you want. I think it's the French front you can have 6, but you can't deploy in French front. So as you can see, our enemy have their forces, 4 of them in the enemy approach, and they got 1 in reserve. So we're all set up and ready to go. So the first thing we do is then draw and assign battle plans. So battle plans are these tokens here. So for the French forces, we assign these to our units, and we know we have 2 of these we can use. So you can see on here it says if column, no roll. So if this was on a unit is in a column when they're placed like this, and a unit is in a line when it's like that. So my force wouldn't have to roll to activate, but it tells you what the force does basically. So they're going to advance. If there's any enemies when they advance into that section, the enemy takes a shock check at -2. They then change to line, and then they attack if they can with a +1/+1. So we would assign that on there. We'd grab another battle plan and assign that. We then assign the enemy battle plans, but the difference being that they are drawn at random, which is a nice little touch. So we're going to pull the first one. So it's aimed. So how this works is you put it on the best unit. So the best combat. So that will be that unit. We'll then assign another one because they have 4. But for this example, we'll just do 2. Let's find... Right, okay. And we'll put that there. Once that's done, the battle then starts. The enemy go first. So you check the battle plans first. This one says, if cavalry, no roll. Well, it's assigned to a cavalry unit, so they don't need to roll to activate. It says advance. So we advance. If our enemy are at 0 to 1, they'll form into a line and then attack, but they're not. So they just stay like that. That then goes back in the pot. The next one is infantry attack +4, but they can't because no one's in range, so they don't do anything. These next guys just use the standard battle plans, because once you run out of your normal battle plans, use these standard ones on the side. And you can see that it says advance if the enemy is 2+ away, which they are. If column, no roll. So these guys don't need to roll, they can just advance, and this guy will move up from reserve. So that's the enemy's activation. We now activate our forces. So here we have push. If column, no roll, so we don't need to roll because we're in column. It says advance and shock 4. Well, we advance, but there's no enemy in this region, so we don't shock them. That's all they do. This one here says advance. So we advance. Shock -2. Well, there's no one there. But we change to a line now. So they change to a line. And then they attack with a +1/+1. So this is where the combat factor comes in. So they have a 3. But they've now got +1 because of their battle plan. So they need to roll a 4 or less to inflict a hit. So we roll the dice and we roll a 10. So nothing happens. But let's say we rolled a 2. Okay, we've inflicted a hit. Now the hit goes on the weakest unit, the closest weakest unit. So you look at their combat factors. He's got a 4. With a 2, he's got 5, he's got 4. So it's going to be this guy here is flipped. Now when a unit's flipped, they are reduced. So their combat values are not as good and their activation values are not as good. If he takes another hit, they're dead, they're gone. Cavalry are never flipped. They don't have any more stats. They're just killed outright. So we've activated our main battle plans. We then use our standard battle plans for the rest of the force. And at this stage in the battle, it's just going to be advances. And when you're in a column, you don't need to activate to roll. So they go in there. These guys move into there. We'd then move the turn counter down to 2. And again, select more battle plans. Now, let's just say we're through the turn here. And we have assigned this one here to this force. Push. Now this says advance, shock, -4. So we push into here. Now as soon as a unit moves into a unit with enemies, the enemy has to make a shock check. And how that's done is the unit takes their combat factor and needs to roll that or under to pass. But this battle plan gives a -4 to that, so there's no way this unit can pass. There's no point in rolling the dice, they would be destroyed. If they were at full health, again, it has to be the weakest unit, they would be flipped. But because these guys were already flipped, and they've now failed, they're destroyed. These units, when they come to activate, if they don't have a battle plan, they can now use the fire. If they're in line, they don't need to roll to activate, but this unit here is in column, so we use that top number 6, so we need a 6 or less. We rolled an 8, so this unit would not be able to act. If we rolled the 6 or under, a 1, we can then attack. And attack is at range 0, so if you're in the same region, or 1 away. So he then rolls needing 6 or less. Nope. If he scores a hit, the cavalry would be killed. And basically you keep doing this. You keep checking for route checks at the end of each battle turn. So if we had 3 or more, 3 times the combat value than the enemy, they start routing back. And we try and chase them off the board. Now, that is the main gist of how the battle works. Cannons can fire at any range. Cannons are brilliant, but again, they don't have any stats on their other side, so they're destroyed. So if we destroy our forces, we've destroyed them all during the battle, before the battle ends. These units are then taken and put back into the area that they came from, the battle area on the campaign board. So obviously the aim is to destroy the force that moved into your area or the area you moved into, and you then hold that objective. I really like this combat system. It's very simple but elegant at the same time, and adding these battle plans is a brilliant little idea, especially as the enemies are random. So it might seem a bit strange that they are assigned something and you think, well, I'm not sure if they would do that, but that's how the game works. But then as the active player, you get the choice of making these battle plans work for you, especially things like square, where you can pre-attack the cavalry with a +4 if they're at range 0 to 1, which makes sense. They would fire upon the cavalry before they come into attack, and you can activate that before the enemy get their activation, so that's really neat. So let's go back to the campaign board. So, victory conditions. As you go through the campaign, that's what you're going to do. You're going to go through the sequence of play, you're going to go to the battle board, you're going to come back onto here. Now, you see here we have superior, historical and inferior. Now, if we complete our campaign before the turn counter enters here, we get a superior victory and we get 30 points. If we manage to grab all objectives before here, we get a historical. So we match Napoleon, we get 20 points. If we complete the campaign here, we did worse than Napoleon did, and we get an inferior with 10 points. So this adds a bit of pressure because you are trying to achieve your objectives as quick as you can. And what I found was that I was getting preoccupied with, I want to battle these, I want to battle this, but you need to concentrate on the objectives, and you need to definitely make sure you split your forces into groups so you can push on to as many objectives as you can. With the activation for the enemies being random, you can get lucky and they might not push into your areas, but most of the time they are going to. So what are my final thoughts on this game? I think it's absolutely fantastic. I'm not a massive Napoleonic fan, but I have dabbled in Napoleonic gaming before, and this game gives you the flavour of Napoleonic, but it's not so detailed that you're just trying to look through the rule book and struggling to understand it. At its core, it's a very, very simple game, but it's just got so many neat little things in there that just add depth to it. And as you're playing it, you can imagine these French forces pushing into cities. When you're changing your guys from line to column, you can just imagine the mass of infantry and cannons firing in the battle. So I think it's fantastic. So I definitely recommend it if you are into solitaire solo wargaming. This one is definitely for you. If you like Napoleonic era games, then this is a must. I'll say it again, this is a must. Once you get your head around it, this is a fantastic little system. And it is a DVG classic. The box is absolutely massive. So this is still available to get from DVG. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. I haven't gone into absolutely every single part of the game, but I just wanted to give you an overview and a review and my thoughts of the game. So it's definitely a massive thumbs up from JK. So until next time guys, I'll see you in the next video.